everybody. Welcome to the CNR committee for August. To remind you, we are live streamed, audio live streamed, so we'll be very decorous, as is our wont. Welcome, Dan. We have no apologies. Any conflicts of interest? We have none, thank you. Item 3, confirmation of minutes. Someone like to move that? Dan moves, Robbie seconds. Any comment of accuracy, changes? All good? I'll put that then. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Matters arising, item 4. Anything out of there? Phil?
Yes, I just wondered on page 6, the food forest licence, I gather from the Kaiapoi Tuahiwi board meeting, that still hasn't been sorted.
Yes.
Is there any update on
that? Yes, it was raised last night. Was it officially at the meeting or unofficially at the meeting last night? And I asked Chris, where the hell is that? Because it's a year more or less since it was meant to have started to roll over, and it's in hand. Chris is. Do you want to? Yes, it's happening.
I believe that Grant McLeod had a meeting with Brent Cairns on site last Thursday morning, to talk about that among other things and get a way forward for the licence. At the moment, it's actually sitting with the property unit to make the final changes to it, and it should be how far away, Grant? Do you know? Okay, so we'll get another update. We'd be happy to send that to the CNR members, and obviously we'll be keeping Brent informed along the way.
Yeah, there were a couple of things, but it wasn't a straight rollover because they requested a toilet, which was a bit debatable, and also the rights to put a building there, which had to be sorted through. So we're working on both those, and as Chris said, it'll be happening pretty soon, which will be good because it has been embarrassing how long it's taken. Thank you. We're done with 4. We have no deputations. We're up to the report 6.1. Simon. Have a seat. And Grant. Sorry. Oh, I know, you need
a... Afternoon, everyone. So this report is to appoint a fee waiver subcommittee to look at fee waiver applications for community facilities. As you'll know, there was an update to the fees and charges policy, which decided to set a subcommittee of CNR to review fee exemption waivers. This was previously being done on a report basis to this committee. So to expedite the applications, it was decided through the policy to set up a subcommittee. So today it was just to nominate and appoint members to the subcommittee, with Councillor Doody being one of the preordained members, as she's the portfolio holder for community facilities. And then part of this is to delegate the authority to the subcommittee to review the fee waivers.
Who's putting their hand up? Wendy's there, of course, anyway. Phil? Robbie? Robbie and Phil? Everybody happy with that? The Mayor moves, the seconder, Nikki seconds. Robbie and Philip fill those 2 positions. I don't need to put that as a separate motion, do I? Or yes, you... Moving it, okay. With those in C, would you like to move the whole recommendations A to G? Can you second that again, Nikki? Dan.
Just briefly to say that this is a really good outcome. We worked on this last term of council, and this seemed to be the best way of going forward. We spent a lot of time investigating the appropriate way of setting up fees and charges, and to get into a system. We looked extensively at other councils and other examples, and where we got to, I thought was probably the best. It was the best way we could find that would manage an appropriate way that also protected our staff from being directly involved in setting fees. I think it was, and also having a smaller subcommittee to come together in this way, I think is the appropriate way. And Councillor Doody was involved, as was Councillor Barnett last term when we were discussing that. So I think with Councillor Doody there, she will be well aware of how we set that up, and the two councillors there I think will be really add to that. So that's really appreciative of that. Could I just say in general, Simon, I just had some feedback up the street from where we've had to cancel bookings and all that, and we're really impressed with how you and the team have been dealing with that, and passed on to me just how easy and great we've been to deal with, and so I just wanted to pass that on to you. So thank you for your role in that, because that's really good feedback from someone I didn't know that just stopped me up the street to mention that to me. So thanks very much for what you've been doing in that process, because it's at times like this when we're in difficult circumstances that people do judge our council and how we treat people. So that's really good service, so thank you.
Thank you, Dan, for those comments. Nikki, speak to that.
Not much to say other than I think that this is a fantastic idea, the structure and the reasons behind it I fully endorse, and I think that this will be a great committee. It's representative of 3 different wards and with some great people on it, so I wish you all the best.
Anyone else? Robbie?
Thank you. I've been involved in several times in looking at the policy regarding this, and most of you'll recall I actually opposed in the last term of council the application of this, but nevertheless it's in. It cost us 40+ thousand, and I want to bring some scrutiny back into the process.
Obviously I was involved in the last committee that had a look at this. I just want to note that in terms of community development, we've already had some seminars on social recovery with COVID, and that we're going to find that groups are having less and less potentially money to be able to put forward. The way to keep a community connected is through social connection, so I think it's absolutely essential that our community has the opportunity to use our community facilities, and the cost of not doing that is actually going to be higher. So I really encourage the committee to look very carefully at the ability to pay, which is what we discussed last time. Obviously groups that can pay should pay, but those who can't and are doing a service to the community with their voluntary work definitely should be considered.
Good afternoon, everybody. So look, Cust Anglican Cemetery, the church actually came to us and inquired as to whether or not the council would be willing to take over the maintenance and management of that cemetery, as well as the ownership of it. As you can appreciate, the population of the church there starting to age, and it's an asset that they still value, but the practicalities of them looking after it are diminishing with the ageing population they've got within their own congregation. We've had a look at how much it would actually cost per annum. So you'll see there that one of the options in the staff recommendation is $3,700 to maintain that per annum. There is another option there in terms of we would grant them a similar sum for them to actually look after it themselves. However, as I've said, obviously for the longevity of the church and for the certainty of the cemetery within the area, their preference was for it to come over to council ownership. It's worth noting as well, through the report that you'll see, there's a reference to the Cemeteries and Burial Act that's currently going before Parliament. One of the aspects of that particular change in legislation is that cemeteries such as this would come over to council if churches or any kind of private owners of cemeteries do actually become defunct or to the point that they can't look after them anyway. So there's a good chance that if that legislation passes through, these sorts of things will naturally come over to us as a local district council to look after in time with some of those cemeteries as well. So happy to take questions on the report.
Just two questions. Have you received any indication as to whether or not they would consider non-Anglican burials to be on that site?
That's not a question that I have posed to them, Chris. I don't know if you'd had any further conversations with them around that.
I haven't received any feedback about that, but if we were to take over the cemetery and it was in council ownership, then we don't have denomination-based areas within our cemeteries anymore. The only areas that we actually set aside are for the RSA, I believe.
So would it default to that?
We would have to have a conversation with them. We have absolutely every right to have denomination areas within our cemeteries. So we'd have to have that conversation with them. At this stage, this is around sort of a principle-based approval. They still have a process to go through themselves as to whether or not they want to actually pass this to us. So it's really an indication as to whether they should, it's worth them even going through that process themselves. And if they decide to, then we could start having those further conversations.
Yeah, the reason I ask is just because for the purpose of voting on a resolution, I'd like to know, because if they are not amenable to that, then obviously it makes better sense to give them the funding, and otherwise and to do with what they wish, and perhaps the membership may change over time and enable them or not, and revisit it otherwise. But my other question would be, what are the implications if the community expectation of maintenance standard changes as a result of council takeover? Like, how do we justify a lesser standard than the urban centres at the moment? You're talking about a lesser standard in the cemetery, so sorry, who do I?
Well, it would be through our levels of service anyway. So I'm not sure that we would have any reason to up the standard that's currently there.
Thank you.
Possibly help with that, if that's permitted. This is a small cemetery. There is another cemetery in Cust, which is off Christall. It's either Avenue or Lane, I can't remember what it's called, but that's right up the top, and that is multi-denominational. I don't know what the capacity is there in terms of, but it's a very big area, and so they cater for all faiths and non-faith as well out there. But this is just a small remaining area, but that's probably, as Chris has indicated, around a conversation with Bernard and others up there around that point. But there's plenty of capacity in the other burial area up there.
I'm not sure if I've perhaps got a conflict of interest because I've got family members in there. No, I can't. I thought I went there the other day just checking to see if they're still there. But my question really is, there is quite a long driveway, which I think, if it serves me right, I think someone used to graze their sheep along there. Is that correct or not? Because that keeps that tidy.
I'd have to look into what side leases or anything like that that they've got, but I'm not 100% sure on what the grazing regime is there. Could well be that there's somebody grazing out there.
Yeah, there's a picture in 3.5, and you can see in 3.5 that there is a track.
Yeah, there is.
But there is a fence also along there. So half of the space at the moment is just looked after by the adjacent farmer, and if the council was going to look to take it over, we would formalise that through an agreement, but we wouldn't be wanting to take that off the farmer at any stage until it was actually needed for burials. If we were to take it over, we would pretty much run it as it is, unless expectations in the community changed around how we were operating that cemetery. But it is quite small, there's not a lot of burials, and we'd be happy for the farmer, more than happy for the farmer, to continue to look after the bit that he currently does.
Yeah, carrying on. It's a lovely little cemetery, and very much respected by people.
Thank you. I just wondered what would happen to the records, the existing records of the cemetery, who's there and who would be keeping those records if we were to take it over?
Yeah, so I mean, the church would still have some form of role to play, and that's something that we'd have to work through as well with them. So they've in essence still got to talk to their church trustees and also their bishop around how this would actually work. So we could actually talk about some of those things with them in terms of how that information would be transferred over. We'd certainly wanting to keep it though, in terms of a public record for who was there and so forth, because that's important historical knowledge if nothing else.
And I'll second it.
Yeah, Mayor moves, Wendy seconds. Dan.
Bernard Kingsbury approached me about this about 12 months ago, and it was at a point where Grant met with me with Bernard on site, and it was at a point where Bernard's just getting to the point where it's just getting a bit much for him. And he's involved in so many different things up there. Being the sexton for this was just something he was finding to be a bit of a drain, and mowing it and upkeep of that. So personally, I'm supportive of this. I think it's a sensible thing to do. I think Nikki raises a fair point around denomination and whether that would still remain if it's in our ownership, and that's a matter, I guess, that we would need to have conversation with the church property, well, our staff would with the church property trustees and ultimately the bishop, because it's their say, I suppose, in the handing it over. But in principle, I approve us taking over the ownership of this and responsibility. It makes sense, and as Grant says, in time, in not too distant future, we wouldn't have a say in this in any event, because it would just automatically transfer with if the bill goes through Parliament. So I think this just makes sense and relieves a burden on somebody who's does a huge amount for our community, and we're very lucky to have the services of Bernard and other members of the community that do so much in Cust.
Yeah, thank you. I concur with that, and really, should this go through, I think the council needs to give a big, a letter of thanks to Bernard for all his hard work he's put in there over the years. He's keeping it in really good condition. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm quite happy to support this. I just wanted to make sure that it felt like it was the right thing to do for the communities involved. So, yep, happy to vote for that.
Anybody else? Yeah, well, Dan summed it up pretty well. I mean, there's only two options: you take it over, or wind up giving them a grant to maintain it. And as we've covered, the government are likely to force their hand anyway, so it's a bit of a no-brainer. Would you like to write a reply, Your Worship? I'll put that for adoption then. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. 6.3. Thank you, Grant. Matt, hiding round the corner. I presume you're still hiding round the corner. We are in your hands.
Thank you. So, as always, the purpose of this report is to update the Community and Recreation Committee on the year-to-date progress for aquatics. It's important to note that this report was written prior to going back into level 2, so there is quite a few things that are slightly different at the moment. The transition went relatively smoothly, with staff and customers already largely familiar with our level 2 operation and restrictions. This has seen us instigate the standard requirements around contact tracing, head counts and physical distancing, but also some specific things to aquatics, like restrictions around access to changing rooms, programs including aquarobics and learn to swim. Unlike previously, we've been able to continue operating aquarobics classes following discussions with staff, customers and other facilities. These classes now have a limited class head count to ensure that we're able to maintain appropriate distancing within the pool and the changing spaces. And as in the previous situation, to ensure compliance with physical distancing, we've paused all lower level learn to swim classes, which involve direct physical contact between staff and customers. The tutors who were to be teaching those classes have either opted to take leave or been redeployed to assist the council efforts in contact tracing and other areas of the business. Back to the report. In 4.3, we are seeking further support for community groups looking to run events at the aquatic facilities. We're proposing a 25% discount for qualifying groups, which would address this demand with limited overall impact on budget, as this is not a key part of our business, with between 5 to 8 after-hours pool hires events happening in any given year. In 4.4, it details our plans around an upcoming program maintenance closure at Kaiapoi Aquatic Centre. As noted, some of this work has already been addressed during the level 3 stage of the previous COVID event, when Ministry of Health requirements allowed us to have contractors on site but not customers. The majority of these works relate to the repair of the main pool shell tile surface, where grout is worn away, which creates the potential for tiles to start lifting. Following the drafting of this report, a further contractor meeting was held, and we now have updated dates as opposed to what appears in the report before you. This has pushed the work out by around about a week. So in recommendation E, it says notes a program maintenance closure at Kaiapoi Aquatic Centre between 5 January and now that would be 16 January. So it's a couple extra days of full closure, and then with limited levels of service until 5 January 2021, which is an additional week. I'll take the rest of the report as read, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Just with regard to the groups and the volunteer organisations, etc., that would be pretty much local, would they? So the ratepayers.
So this is for the after hours pool hires. Yes. So the one that jumps to mind is the volunteer fire brigade was the most recent pool hire.
Hello, Matt. Could you just clarify the dates? I didn't quite match them up. That was in 6.3e, the period the Kaiapoi Aquatic Centre will be closed.
Absolutely. So notes a program maintenance closure at Kaiapoi Aquatic Centre between 5 January and 16 January. So I think it said 13 January. Yep, so that pushes that first full part of the closure out by a couple of days. And then, so during that time, the work's done going to be they'll be prohibitive to having customers in the space. Then the remaining period we will have some pool space open for leisure swimming and the like through till 5th of February when we will reopen the main pool.
Just following that up, how busy a period is January for the pool?
Generally not really, because a lot of people travel, as well as having Dudley open, we can manage a lot of that space through that time. Generally it's a time when people do a lot of leisure swimming, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with the site at Kaiapoi. There's limited leisure opportunities there. So generally it's a time we see a lot more demand for the leisure side of things up at Dudley Pool.
Okay, my question really is, carrying on from this, for those people that are going to be affected by it, that do use it and they need to go up to Dudley, how can we accommodate them if they can't really afford to do that travel?
That's a very good question. It's quite easy for us to pause memberships and that sort of thing. Obviously, that doesn't allow them so that when they come back, they can have additional time on their membership and card like that. Off the top of my head, that would probably be the simplest way to address that. There will be space in the leisure pool. However, it's a lot shallower, so whether it's appropriate for the tasks is a bit more situational.
Thank you for that.
If I can just add to that, we absolutely have to do the closure, and it's always difficult to know exactly when to do the closure. And there's been lots of CNR meetings where we've proposed dates, and there's been debate around those dates, because generally we propose the second week of the school holidays, I believe, as the date, and that's one of our quiet times, because I don't think we have the Learn to Swim going, which is when the pool's particularly busy, but it ends up being that recreation time. So Matt and his team did quite a bit of work to try and identify a time out of the usual when we do have our really, really low occupancy in the pool, and that is around that January time where the kids are not at school. While it is a little bit of recreation, it is one of our lowest use times in the pool. So the alternative would be to move back into school holidays and do it in the second week of the school holidays, but there is more people that will be using the pool then.
No, I'm happy if we can recompense them in some way. Thank you. I'll move the report. Once again, thank you very much, Matt. Really appreciate your honesty and integrity in this, and thank you.
Yeah, just with regard to my question, obviously a discount comes at a cost, and hence the question. The ratepayers that use and are attracting the discount, so it falls back onto the general rate if as pools are a hole into the ground into which you pour money, but they're a necessary thing to have, given that we're surrounded by water, etc. Yeah.
I'll put 6.3 then for adoption. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The Community Team Social Recovery Update Report provides an overview of community team activity related to key COVID-19 social recovery project areas, and in particular details progress towards the development of a more food secure district, and alongside that the potential development of an associated community hub. And you will note that staff will present a briefing on the food security and hub project at the conclusion of this meeting. We need to just...
I'll hold it. Hold them down. All of them.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. So also of particular note is the recent acquisition of $690,000 in Ministry of Social Development funding towards project development, and also that both Rata Foundation and Department of Internal Affairs have indicated their potential support towards funding the completion of such a project. As detailed, consideration must be given to the resourcing of facilitation for this and other social recovery priorities that sit outside of existing community development strategy priorities. And it is important that we don't lose the support that is given to the rest of the community, that we retain strong community across the district. Staff are preparing a report detailing a proposed collaborative option, ensuring that appropriate and timely utilisation of this considerable funding, as well as ensuring the appropriate planning and resourcing of associated recovery projects. And this will be presented at the September Council meeting. I'll take the content of my report as read, highlighting in particular the significant community support for the social recovery of our district. And you'll see this evidenced by the response to the social and community sector surveys, and also the breadth of representation at the recent Social Recovery Forum in Woodend. You'll also see that each of the social recovery priority issues directly relate to project lines in the draft Waimakariri COVID-19 recovery strategy, and that a strong evidence-based has been applied to identifying and informing action related to these priorities. Mentoring, skill sharing and opportunity. Inclusion for all residents, both social and digital. And connection, including increased collaboration for better local outcomes. In terms of collaboration, we've seen a very recent example with a collaborative response to a key local issue, resulting in the willingness of Salvation Army and City Mission to work together to ensure the maintenance and enhancement of local drug and alcohol counselling provision. And this has been a key concern for our district, where we look to have a significant reduction in such provision, right at a time where it's anticipated that we will see increased dependence on alcohol and drugs as the mental health effects of the COVID incident take effect. Community team staff continue to work through a range of networks alongside our key partners to build formative evidence and facilitate appropriate community-led responses. I'm happy to answer any questions in relation to my report.
Which I emailed earlier, which was in relation to the North Canterbury Model Railway Club. In the pamphlet you provided, they weren't mentioned in there. My understanding is that they were still keen to be part of that discussion, albeit that they would prefer to be in Rangiora. They still wish to be part of the hub consideration. That was their submission during the annual plan. I just welcome why they were omitted from. Any reason why they were omitted from that document?
I wonder whether that might better be addressed as part of the briefing. I think Greenspace staff are more up to date with that aspect.
I'm happy to hold. I'm happy to hold that over to them. Yes,
that's okay.
Fine. Yes, happy to hold that over to them. Thank you.
Question, Tessa. Under your umbrella with community welfare at Kaiapoi, the community board in Kaiapoi last night, that was mention is made of grey powers concerns that of the diminution of services to their members, resulting in some quite severe problems like caregivers being dropped from three times a week to one a week, and caregivers not coming who were doing the shopping and people going hungry. Are you, specifically to grey power, are you aware of that?
Yes, we are, and that has been discussed through the Health Advisory Group and various other networks. The understanding at the moment is that there is a gradual reintroduction of such services, and I've seen evidence of that anecdotally. The provision of things like housekeeping, the feedback that we had from the general practitioner and nurse practitioner at the Health Advisory Group was that there was almost a blanket provision put in place when you got to a certain age, and that this is being reviewed in some cases. There has been a reduction in capacity with one of the service providers, and so we're kind of looking into that at the moment. So yes, we are aware of it.
I'm not sure if it's appropriate now or later, but in the briefing, Satisfy Food Rescue, did they apply for the funding? And if so, what was the funding they applied for to be used for?
I think that will fit really well with the briefing. They were one of the partners that were involved in discussions around the application to that fund.
Tessa, thank you very much for this thorough committee report. I really very much appreciate it. There's just been, you've had so much work to do in the last, since COVID started, and you can just see how much the committee, your team is doing to bring us through this, so I appreciate it. The question that I want to ask as well, please, is how are you going for volunteers now with all this? Is it they coming back up again, or are you still a bit tight?
The volunteer sector. So the social and community sector survey identified that some groups are still experiencing a reduction in volunteer capacity, and it appears that that is in relation to older volunteers being stood down during the COVID event and reconsidering their availability. So there's quite a bit of work going into supporting the volunteer sector to attract volunteers and to also make sure that they can retain volunteers.
Thank you.
Tessa, just commend you on the you and the team on the social recovery planning forum last week. That was excellent, and certainly feedback I've had from people that went along there certainly enjoyed it and got a lot out of it. I think you and your team, and you know my thoughts in this space. I think you're doing an outstanding job, and certainly very pleased with the leadership that you're providing. So thank you, you and your team in this area. I think it's really great that we're going to just discuss it further in the forum around that funding that's come through for a hub. I think it's a really good option for us, and certainly in terms of hubbing with Satisfy Food Rescue and that, I think that's a really great opportunity, and noting that others are likely to other funders are interested in that, which presents a really good opportunity for us. The issue that Councillor Blackie raised before around grey power, that has also been raised with me, and I've written a letter to the District Health Board, which was supported, the Health Advisory Group and other bodies, the local member of Parliament as well, that set up a meeting in there to discuss that issue. I had a meeting with Jan Pentecost last week, who's the President of Grey Power, and I've agreed to help her further in other discussions with providers. She just needs a bit of support and a bit of backing, and I'm happy to do that, because that provision of care that is provided for people actually keeps them in their homes, and means that they're less likely to be going into other environments or making choices to have to move out of their homes or out of the health system. So it's quite critical. If that funding isn't provided, or that support isn't provided, it has quite serious consequences for that age bracket, and I certainly, whatever I can do to support it, I will. I just wanted to mention as well that we had a very generous offer come through today from the Hubei government, via the Hubei government in China, and they're going to donate 2,000 face masks to our district, and so they're coming to present those on Thursday. And I mentioned to Tessa this morning it'd be nice to find a way that we could distribute that to community groups and those that need them. So it's a really generous offer to come through from the New Zealand Hubei Economy Trade Culture Association, which is the official title, but if we can find a way to our food banks and other areas to distribute those, that would be really great. So it's nice to have a positive come through all the other things that are going on at the moment. So it's nice to have some generous benefactors, but thanks again to you and your team for what you do.
Anybody else? When you ready for play? All good. I'll put that for adoption then. 6.4 A to G. All those in favour say aye. It's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Tessa.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Kia ora koutou. I'd like to give you an update on libraries and our activities. And since we last met in June, I'll take the report as largely read and like to draw your attention to just several points in the report. Starting with 4.1, Kids Fest 2020. To some, it might just look like a school holiday festival, but to many, it's been a long-running New Zealand-wide festival that draws together parents and children with largely free activities. Now, when COVID reared its head in February, all this central coordinating was paused. When we were confident that we would be able to run our Kids Fest activities through waimakariri libraries, the libraries team kicked into action really quickly, and our newly evolving culture of agency, ideas and action set up a team of largely customer service library assistants with no leadership responsibility, and they organised and delivered the whole thing. We had stunning mystery trails, which were themed Who is the most fearsome pirate in the Seven Seas. We had craft nights, family quiz nights, and all in all, there were 14 sessions with 761 children and 200 adults from across our district. I went to the Kaiapoi quiz night, and there was a family there who live in Shirley, and for 3 years in a row they have come out to the Kaiapoi event because they love it so much. We had family visiting from Albany with locals in the district who were brought along to the event. It's quite a thing. The Rangiora and Kaiapoi quiz nights were so popular that they needed 2 sets of questions, and it was sold out 2 weeks in advance. Well, sold out, it was free. Some families trying to double dip and attend both and win the prize, hence the need to change the questions at both venues. The best quote of Kids Fest was what a little girl in the family from the Rangiora winning team, who said, "This is the best day in my life," and she'd won a family pass to Sport Susie for her family. And I'll hand on heart say that the Kaiapoi event, I've been in libraries for 36 years, and I have never been to a community event that was free, that was so memorable and so special, and the genuine feedback from the participants was incredible. We're using these sorts of events to grow leadership in our team, as I mentioned, so that even if you have an unnamed position, untitled position, you still have leadership opportunities for your CV. If I can point to 4.3, you might be interested in our ebook usage. Now, understandably, COVID had a dramatic effect and impact on our district's reading habits. And when we compared data from February 2019 to April 2020, we saw that it had skyrocketed 394%. We understand that and the why. Our usage has dipped a little bit, but we've been gathering our data quite carefully, and we're really surprised to see many readers continuing to read e and print, borrowing both. Our most dynamic platforms, which are Overdrive, which trades as Libby, and Belinda, Australian vendor, trading as BorrowBox, have absolutely skyrocketed. And data I just grabbed today shows that active users are up 166% on the same period last year. Ebook loans are up 278%, and reserves are up 223%. We're using the collective power of our Canterbury Consortia and platform consolidation and making vendors work for their money to get the best value in a very, very competitive market. We've been 4.6 refers to promoting reading in Te Reo Māori. Now, Lianza, the Library Association, ran a National Books Alive program recently, which I'd like to note starred our Mayor Dan as our celebrity reader, and we've been proud to also be celebrating reading in Te Reo Māori as part of these awards. Te Kura Punamu Award recognises and celebrates written in or translated into Te Reo Māori. The Tua Iwi Education Committee were contacted about working together to film virtual story times with the Te Reo Māori finalists, and libraries delivered copies of books to them so they could decide on the right approach for us. It was suggested that this would be a great opportunity for rangatahi youth, and they suggested 2 students. 2 sisters, Eden and Mai Riwi Couch, were absolutely exceptional, and their mother is a leading educationalist. Their confidence, beautiful use of reo, and openness to this collaboration was really beneficial to the libraries team and gave a very gentle nudge to those of us who are learning Te Reo Māori to be more public with it. Lianza Books Alive celebration that led on from what happened in lockdown and the virtual story times has gifted libraries a really tangible opportunity, waimakariri libraries to acknowledge a tangible opportunity, linking with tangata whenua and bringing to life the library's strategic direction that we celebrate Te Ao Māori and honour Te Reo within our community organisations and programs. I'd like to acknowledge that this report doesn't cover the most recent week of COVID Alert Level 2, so if there are any questions around that, but I'll take your questions on anything.
Thank you, Paula. That's what you call a wow report. Chris told me this morning at briefing he had to limit how many success stories you're allowed to put in there in case we just
Actually had one more.
Well, go on, do it.
Okay, so 4.7 was our diverse community, and those of you who were on this committee last year would remember we signalled that we wanted to develop closer connections with new Zealanders living across Waimakariri. Richard Shepherd, our collections manager, has looked at census data. He's worked with the Migrants and Newcomers team and Tessa's group and interviewed, consulted with, talked and listened, and result of that, ongoing conversations since about November last year. We're proud to say that we have collections in Hindi, Japanese, simplified Chinese, Tagalog, Filipino, German and Spanish. Some of these are sitting in the Rangiora workroom, some of them are still waiting to arrive because of COVID-related shipping delays. Community feedback and the consultation that Richard undertook suggested that people who want these are also wanting ESOL, English as a Second Language materials, so we're catering for that too. This is all within existing budget planned last year, and it was, if we were to sum up the response and feedback from this initiative, it has been, quote, heartfelt appreciation for acknowledging their diversities and cultures.
Excellent, thank you. Questions of Paula? Wendy?
Paula, with the COVID-2 come back again, are the book bags coming back into vogue again?
What we've, ironically, the week before COVID hit, one of our team leaders began to look at all of our processes throughout lockdown, including the book bags, and we established a small group to look at our processes with fresh eyes, you know, that the beauty of hindsight. So we've refined this. It's all still on the website. It's still been promoted through social media. If people ring, if people are in the library doing literally a grab and run, which we've experienced. So long answer, yes, still going, just refining. And as of last Friday, I've still had 2 new libraries contact us wanting our processes to be shared with them. So it takes it to a total of 17 district libraries around New Zealand taking our process.
The other question that I just would like is 4.2 with the Toddlers Times in Oxford Library, and the little building that was the little theatre which was built by one of the local builders. Does that have his name on or anything like to say that he has
He
has
hasn't
done?
asked for that,
No.
but that's a really nice idea.
Yeah.
We're really conscious about using local supplies
Yes.
as we're trying more and more with what we're buying.
Yeah.
But that's a really great idea. I'll pass it on to Jason. We could get a little plaque made.
Yeah, I just think it's lovely. It's
Yeah.
really nice to do.
Yep, no problem.
Just wondering how you found people responding to wanting to give photos and information about the 4 September commemoration, if you've had much input on that, or if it needs a bit of a rev up.
The resignation we have mentioned in the back of this was the person responsible for gathering that. So yeah, that was Claudia Folly, and she was our, I would say, resident heritage star. Given the volume of things being coming our way with COVID and adapting, nobody's picked that up at the moment because those positions are being advertised at the moment. I am looking for people, if there is anybody in the 119 people that have applied, to have that heritage expertise whilst needing a customer focus. There's quite a unique skill set. I've been working, attended the last Altogether Kaiapoi meetings and have offered 2 of my team to help build together a photo montage with Linda and her mother. They got back to me last week and said that they're happy to do that themselves, and we've given some ideas around how that curation could take place outside of the 4th of September.
Hello, Paula. I see you are dropping the Wheelers e-platform app. I wasn't familiar with that app, but I'm slightly familiar with Wheelers. Do they still supply the library with books? They may bind them, I'm not sure what happens, but...
Sure. So Wheelers are very big in the school library market. That's where their traditional value proposition has been. They've moved into public libraries. When I started, it was signalled that we now had 3 vendors: Libby, Overdrive, Belinda, and Wheelers, and the services that we were getting were quite different, markedly different. I have a historical professional relationship with our vendor through Wheelers, so we invited him in to talk through the points of difference. There were concerns around the app and the efficiencies of staff buying things through their provision. We've repeatedly tried to address this and give them an opportunity, but value for money wise, we are getting a much better deal when we're looking at the other 2. We're not using any of their book binding, their shelf ready products. So it's been a long conversation and long decision coming to 31st of October, taking our products to just 2 platforms. But if we're looking at value for money and staff time also, and consortia buying power. Other libraries do use those more transactional services, but we don't.
Thank you. The other question I've had asked of me, taking the bar, a history of the Port of Kaiapoi, is not, apparently, I haven't checked it myself, kept at the Kaiapoi Library, but is housed at Rangiora and has to be requested. Just seemed odd why a local history about Kaiapoi was not kept at the Kaiapoi Library.
I'll hand that to Richard.
And Wheelers also do provide that book, but if you talk to me, I'm sure I can provide you with one too.
Thank you.
I've got nothing to say. It's pretty hard to add to excellence.
I'm simply just going to say, Paula, you're my favorite overachiever. I love reading your reports. I love the passion and the zeal that you bring with everything that you and your team do. And I mean, you're trailblazers. You're absolutely killing it. And I take my hat off to you and all of your amazing staff. Well done.
Yes, I think the power of the team having agency, we're seeing it.
Those comments, but under diversity, I also want to say that I approached Paula with a particularly difficult not difficult, but a tricky situation for a family. And just appreciated how open you were to try and assist that family for someone that's going through some difficult times in their life of identifying who they are, and that the library may be a place where that person may feel safe. So thank you for being open to that and following that through and up with that family. I know they've very much appreciated it, so endorse everything that's been said. Yeah, fantastic effort from you and your team, but that particularly is something that meant a lot to that family, that was followed through, so thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, I'd just like to endorse the comments of my colleagues. I think the library that you run is fantastic, and I've learnt a new word today, shelf ready. It's a bit like shovel ready. So thank you for that phrase.
I will forego my own right of reply. And I will put that motion there to A, B, C. All those in favour say aye. Carried. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Laura, and please convey our thanks to your team.
Thank you.
7, portfolios. Robbie, green space.
Thank you. So potentially a wee apology because some of this work will have been completed since I got my last update from Grant, and I've got it written down with some. So Wanaka Reserve Pegasus Playground Safety Surface Replacement options were considered, including alteration of the slide bound and making this safe for users. Waikuku Beach Toilet near the Surf Club, continuing discussions with water unit over septic tanks and pump replacement, hopefully put an end to issues currently there. Victoria Park toilets, wallpaper damage and replacement to include clear perspex as anti-vandalism solution. Gladstone Park playground, stolen lily pad swing, second time. New one is on order with logos on it. King Street roundabout replacement planning programmed and post-water unit repairs. Raven Quay toilet now demolished. Kaiapoi Wharf CCTV installed in conversation with local restaurant owner. Turi Moana Drive car park in Pegasus, the work was starting a couple of weeks ago. Koraki Beach car park, works was nearing completion. All areas now chip sealed with minor work still to be completed, such as line marking. Mandeville Retail Village corner bollards were being installed a week ago, as I understand it, and it had delayed project due to COVID. Dudley Park lights now commissioned, operational and available for community to book. Kaiapoi artwork reinstatement progressing with prices now received from contractor, expected to be completed in coming weeks. Consent has been obtained for Mandeville Toilet, and looking to go to tender for both Mandeville and Silverstream Estate toilets as a package shortly. That's me.
In relation to the comment, that just a question to Chris actually mentioned about the toilet vandalism, have we followed up with our insurance company to see whether that damage is actually covered?
The value won't be enough. The value in the end only came to, I believe, $1,400, so it's not enough. But we are still working with the EDSARD is working with the police and with the school and they've identified who have done it, and looking at what possible reparation we can actually work through, which at the moment is not looking like involving the police in anything but conversations, which is really, really good. And we'll look at the potential for them to work in Silverstream Reserve or do something else to pay off that money. And if they're happy with going down that route, that's really positive for us and having their family involved. If they're not happy to go down that route, then the police have said they're happy to deal with it.
Thank you. I'd just really like to start off first and foremost as congratulating Chris, your teams, the pools, the community team, the library and the green space. They are doing a fantastic job, and I very much appreciate the amount of back on again. Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. I just want to mention about the Mandeville Sports Club Board. The strategic plan is getting closer to being approved. That board does huge amount of work, and the team that goes with them, the sports team, they just work beyond, over and above the call of duty. The mower, which the council provided funding for, is being put to good use, and that ground is looking really beautiful. All the areas where they've never been able to mow because the mower was too big is now looking really sharp. That looks really tidy, and hats off to Richard, he's doing a great job. They've also managed to tidy up the boundary between the park and the private properties where they'd come to council asking for funding, and this was done with the generosity of a private contractor, and now they can move on and get the walking track, and the planting can go ahead in this area. And you've all talked about the toilet facility. Oxford Pearson Park, the fence is along the main street has been repaired and is starting to look up to a really excellent standard. This fence was built back, and I think it might be in the 1930s, so it's actually a really important part of the township history. Is that correct, the 1930s, or not early after? Don't know, no. I'll go and check it out actually, but I'm really pleased with it. It's starting to look really, really good. The men's shed extension at the Pearson Park, the Pearson Park Advisory Board gave it the okay for this extension to be done, and the Oxford men's shed is they're just paying for all this to be built, which is wonderful. The Stadium Waimakariri, that walkabout we had was great. It was just so good to have a look at that stadium, and being able to actually visualise it from right on the ground, than rather than just be looking about there. The COVID-19 social recovery, Tessa and your team, thank you very much for that. That was a very good get together on that one, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of work come through from that. Yeah. Sorry for my bag. The Cuss Community Centre, well, hopefully that will be sorted out shortly. It's been, but in the long run, what a wonderful facility it's going to be. The Mayor and myself and the Age Friendly Chair, we went and spoke to the blood clinic in Rangiora regarding problems they felt that there was a lack of parking. And we also had a discussion about, a couple of areas where they could maybe be able to park. But it was interesting last week when we were at this meeting, that people came up and said, look, we've had no problems with that. We can go in there, park. We were in and out of that clinic in about 5 minutes. So obviously it must be working and working well. So hopefully we don't have any more complaints from it there. And that's really it. Thank you.
Do you want to keep going?
Just had a point to that comment Wendy made around the blood clinic. Just to let, that was a really good summary, Wendy, but just one thing, two things I wasn't aware of. There's 2 car parks at the back. They're going to convert those to be available for, they're currently used by staff. They're going to convert those to be available to those who may need to use them, and also look for other parking solutions in the area. The other point is that if somebody is in need and isn't able to get there, their doctor is actually in a position to direct a home service for getting your bloods taken. I didn't know that, so I just thought I'd mention that as well. So if you hear of anyone that's vulnerable, that isn't able to get down there, then they are able to go to the home and take blood tests. So, but that has to be through your doctor.